Hi, everyone. It is Jamie Joe right here at Madlit Musings Podcast. And today I'm really excited because I have with us Sara Brunsvold, who writes really great fiction. Hey, Sara.
Hello. Thank you for having me back, Jamie. I appreciate
Yes.
you asking me.
Oh, it's so much fun. And I love having these conversations with authors and, talking about your books and everything like that, but then also just talking about things that influence the book and life and story. And sometimes we have really good laughs too.
Yeah.
So, but you have a new book coming out here um, called The Divine Proverb of Streusel, which, first of all, I should say I love Streusel. So you had me at the title.
Awesome. Yes, that's
Mm-hmm.
what we're hoping for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was very wise marketing of you.
Well, sometimes I have genius moments.
So every new book comes with an order of Streusel, right? No.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sure. Right.
There is a recipe for Streuselkuchen. Does that
Hey,
count?
that
There you
we'll take it.
go.
We'll take it. So I'm just going to read the back cover copy just to get us going here. But I'm pulling this off of your website. So the book is called The Divine Proverb of Streusel. And cooking her way through her great grandmother's German recipes provides Nikki Werner an anchor in the storm of family crisis. But will it be enough to fill every hunger she has? I don't know, it's Streusel, that might be enough. Inspired by Sarah's own family story and heritage, this contemporary Christian fiction story features unforgettable intergenerational characters, a touch of midlife romance, small town charm, and yes, unique recipes.
Yeah.
It sounds delicious
In
on
so many
multiple levels.
ways, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that this book was inspired by your own family.
Yes. So the premise of the story is this young woman, Nikki, is reeling from the divorce of her parents after 30
Mm.
years of marriage. And you know, th- no matter how old a child is when that happens, it's traumatic. It's
Yeah.
traumatic, and it can cause some family identity questions. Who am I really? Where is my
Hmm.
family? What is my family now? And that's all things that I experienced. My parents did. They were married for 31 years
Okay.
before their divorce happened, and those were all questions that I wrestled with as well. And so Nikki, as she's diving back into her family heritage and discovers this journal that's filled with authentic German recipes,
Okay.
and not just recipes, but each one is also paired with life wisdom that somebody
Oh.
has pulled from the book of Proverbs. And so that kind of feeds into the
Yeah.
title as well, the divine proverb of Streusel.
Hmm.
So not only do you have this recipe for streusel kuchen, but you have this proverb and life wisdom that goes along with it.
Wow.
So all of this was sort of taken very loosely from my
Mm.
own family story and heritage. And the setting for the book is in this small little hamlet that was settled by German immigrants in Northeast Missouri,
Mhm.
which is very much based on where I grew up. So diving back into my own through Nikki, diving back into family heritage and roots, and the history of this little town, and how her family weaves into that history.
Mhm.
It was therapeutic for Nikki, just like it's therapeutic for me as well. And when I was walking through that back
Yeah.
in my 20s.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's neat. And I don't know if people who aren't from the Midwest area realize how strong of a German influence.
Yeah.
Really, like you look at Wisconsin where I'm at, that weaves its way down, Iowa, Missouri, even I think some into Kansas quite a bit.
Mhm.
And it's really almost like a German belt
Yeah.
of
So
influence.
true. So true. And I kind of touch on that in the book. One of the contributing factors of that is in the 1800s, there were a lot of people who were trying to get out of Germany. It was a
Hmm.
very oppressive society.
Hmm.
And and so people were, giving up everything that they had and getting on boats to come to America. And a lot of them, you would think they would go through New York, which some of them did,
Right.
but a lot of them actually went around to the Gulf of
Hmm.
Mexico and up the Mississippi and
Hmm.
landed in St. Louis. So if you look at a map, even modern day map of St. Louis and around the Missouri River,
Hmm.
where the Missouri meets the Mississippi, you'll see a lot of little towns that have very distinct German names.
Very.
And St. Louis especially has a very rich German heritage.
Hmm.
So yeah, you're right. All the way up the river belt
Yeah.
and back down. There's a lot of German history there.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
was doing some research on the German history because one of my books coming out in a year is set just outside of Milwaukee,
Yeah.
which also
Hmm.
has always been known, at least to locals, as Little Germany because
Yeah.
it had so much German influence. And it seemed like, in one sense, Milwaukee was kind of like this heartbeat, and then so much German influence spread out into the small towns. And around here, you go through a phone book. Well, actually, phone books still exist. For those of you who don't know what they are, which I had to explain to my daughter the other day, it's an actual book that you can look up people's names and phone numbers. But
Hmm.
it's just filled with German name, German name, German name,
Yeah.
one after the other.
So we love to vacation in Wisconsin.
Okay.
So we're in Kansas City. Only during the summer, of
Right.
course, because we're not winter people. But we love Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why the authentic German restaurants
Hmm.
that are in Milwaukee, and I think it's pronounced Usingers, the
Hmm.
sausage
Hmm.
factory.
Yep.
Yeah, it's divine. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
highly anticipate going back someday.
Yes, it's so cool. Have you, and not to get stuck on Milwaukee because I want to veer
Well,
back to your
who
book,
doesn't
but
want to get stuck on
I know,
Milwaukee?
right? Right. But have you been to I forget what they call it. There was a certain name for it, but it was where the upper echelons of German society lived along Lake Michigan and the strips of old mansions. I don't know
Oh
if you've
yeah.
seen those.
Hmm. Yeah,
They're
up to like
phenomenal.
Whitefish Bay.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Uh-huh.
Like you wouldn't picture that when you think Milwaukee, and then all of a sudden you're in this district and there's like mansions and they're just
Gorgeous.
like Gilded Age phenomenal, just amazing,
Yeah,
but
it's
interesting.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm assuming then, along with it being your book being inspired by your family story, you have a German heritage too? I'm making a leap.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yes. And speaking of making leaps, some people make the leap that Brunsvold, my last name is German, and it's actually not. I
Right.
know I was disappointed too, but it's actually Norwegian.
Mm-hmm.
So my maiden name, Kaden, is
That,
very
yes.
much German. And so yes, so that is based on my heritage is very much German on both
Hmm.
sides, both my
Okay.
mom and my dad. Their families were all descended from the original immigrants
Mm-hmm.
that came over from Germany.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Well, and I love the way now that you've got a fiction novel coming out where you have like this younger woman really cooking her way through family history,
Mhm.
which is very nostalgic on a lot of levels too. Because I think like Christmas is coming up while we're recording this anyway. Christmas is coming up, and I'm thinking of pulling out my grandma writes recipe books for all of the traditional things that we associate with Christmas based on whatever our family heritage is.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
that's so interesting to me. So do you find that food brings back specific memories, and did you work that into this novel?
Yeah, I think food in general is such a central part of culture and
Yeah.
central part of any heritage, regardless of where in the world your family has originated. It's such a central part of identity.
Hmm.
And there's something about, sharing the foods of generations before. You just feel closer to them.
Yeah.
I feel like you're just so much more connected, even if they have, gone on to heaven years
Hmm.
ago.
Hmm.
Like cooking the foods that they ate, and um, it just adds a whole new dimension to the stories about their lives
Right.
that only food can offer. I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
interesting to me. And I think maybe it's because it brings in more than one of the five senses when you think about it, because you have your taste, you
Right.
have your smell, because that incorporates it. And so you've got those two senses, then obviously your eyes and you're seeing things. So I don't know, maybe that's part of it, is that just becomes such a strong association with a person or a place or an
Or a
event.
time, or a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think sound plays a part in that too, because as you're cooking, the sizzling of the meat, or the simmering sounds, or because food as it's cooking, you do get a lot of sounds
Mm-hmm.
associated with that as well. And so, as I was researching the book, of course, I had never made any of these recipes that are
Okay.
featured in the book. So I was kind of flying blind a little bit. So I did a lot of testing in my own
Fun.
kitchen to try to figure out, what would Nikki be experiencing as she's
Okay.
cooking these things for the first time. And there's something about, as you're saying, just that immersion of sense,
Mm-hmm.
of all your senses. You're almost transported back to the kitchen of whoever it was that wrote down that recipe
Yeah.
originally. You're experiencing the same things, some of the same things that they would have been experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and it just makes you feel much more connected with
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
in new ways.
Absolutely. That's so cool. I love it. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Nikki. So she a single woman, or is she married or divorced, or what's her story?
Yeah, so she is single, but one of the layers that drives her to the point of crisis is not only is her parents' divorce very fresh, but she has a serious boyfriend that up until this point they were on the track, to engagement, and now suddenly she's a little skittish about the
Mm,
whole idea of marriage, and so she's trying to wrestle through that as well, that
mm-hmm.
push pull of, you love somebody but yet you're afraid, in
Yeah.
that pain is so real, and you don't want to go through that again. So that's kind of where she's at as well. So we've got a bit of a layer of, her trying to reconcile what's going on with her parents, and she's got some bitterness toward her dad at this point. And then on top of that, she's got this serious boyfriend who is supportive, but is kind of reaching the end of his
Mm,
limit as well,
sure.
with patience,
Yeah.
because like, he just needs an answer from her.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
that's Nikki. She's a bundle of nerves, shall we say, just trying to
Yeah.
process.
Well, and that makes sense too. And it's funny too, because when you start digging into family history, then when you're going through those personal experiences, you start, I mean, like, I guess I'm thinking when I was a child, I would go through like my mom's trunks, and she had the old doilies and tatting and things that my great grandmother would make. And everything was so romanticized in my mind. But now when I go back and I look through family journals or whatever, you start seeing the brokenness through the generations, and how much that affects. And I could see, like with a character like Nikki, how that could be almost just as disconcerting as her current situation if she's
Right.
uncovering family roots.
Yes, yes, and I think you're hitting on some things there that are definitely in the book,
All right, we won't spoil
where,
anything, but
yeah, no spoilers, but yeah, but needless to say, I think that's one of the joys I find in looking at family history,
hmm
because there's that famous statement, I don't know who said it, but sometimes we read to know that we're not alone.
mm,
And I think that's also one of the reasons why I feel like we're hardwired to learn about our family history as well,
yeah,
to know that we're not alone, and to know that, these people that we may have put on a pedestal or romanticized,
hmm
they walk through some really real things as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
And how did they do that? And
hmm
in learning from them, there's something about seeing your own ancestors going through a hard time that just, to me, I think, puts things, your own trials and tribulations,
hmm
put things into a perspective that makes it seem a little more understandable.
yeah.
Um, so you see some of that at play as well with
Okay.
Nikki as she's uncovering some things.
Yes, yes. That's exciting. On a much smaller scale, um, as I was doing some family research, and this was when my mom was still alive. But I'm just bringing it up as an illustration of how we don't realize how much our lives are affected today by even two or three
Mm.
generations prior. And we don't realize that, obviously I always write about ghosts and things, but to me those are like the ghosts, not literal, but the ghosts of of the past that kind of still influence us today.
Mhm.
It's like the remaining echoes of the lives that lived before us. But I had asked my mom one day, when my mom and my grandma were still alive, we were all in the kitchen. and I wanted some chocolate chips just to eat. You know how you just grab a handful? And I went to the freezer and I pulled out the bag of chocolate chips. And it dawned on me that we might be the only family I knew that keeps chocolate chips in the freezer. And so I asked my mom, I said, Mom, why do we keep chocolate chips in the freezer? Because they don't have to be, they're not going to spoil, right? You could leave them in the counter in a mason jar and they'd be fine. And she's like, well, I don't know. I've always left them in the freezer because my mom put them in the freezer. And she turns to my grandma. She goes, why did you put chocolate chips in the freezer? And my grandma goes, because if you leave them out, they'll melt. And I said, they won't melt though. And she goes, honey, when I was a kid, all we had was an ice box. And the house would get hotter than hot in the summertime because we didn't have air conditioning. So the only way to keep your chocolate good was to put the chocolate chips or the chocolate bar or whatever in the ice box, freeze it so that it wouldn't melt. And so 3 generations later, I'm still putting chocolate chips in the freezer as if it's like going to preserve them, only because my great grandma used to put them in the ice box.
Yeah, isn't that? And I loved how you said that the echoes of, I forget your exact wording, but the echoes of the lives that have come before us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so true. So whether it's small scale things like that, or even, the tendencies that we have and how we relate to one another and how
Mm-hmm.
we resolve problems,
Mm-hmm.
those echoes can come through loud and clear as well.
Yeah.
So I find it fascinating to learn about, just in my own personal life, learn about my grandparents, my mom,
Mm-hmm.
my grandparents, my great grandparents who I didn't know very well,
Mm-hmm.
um, to begin to understand those connections. Like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Why am I here in Missouri, or
Yeah.
Kansas right now?
Yeah.
Um, why do I speak the language that I speak? Why do I
Yeah.
have the last name that I had,
Mm-hmm.
that I was born with? Um, so yeah, I find it very fascinating to dive deep into family
Yes.
stories, and
Yeah.
it's very enlightening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you dive in and you start seeing the spiritual legacy too that
Absolutely.
is left, or perhaps hasn't been there, or is just
Mhm.
starting, or, negative
Right.
impacts versus positive. And yeah,
Right.
there's so much to be found in history,
Right.
especially our family
Amen.
histories. Yeah.
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 Agreed.
So anybody who picks up this book is going to have obviously some fun recipes interspersed throughout the book. And if you're like me, you can't bake worth a dime and you won't save your life, but you can try. And I might try making the streusel because it sounds really good.
And you know what? The streusel is so easy. It's butter and sugar just pinched together
Yeah.
with some seasoning, and like there's no shame in eating it straight. Like
Okay.
just making the
Perfect.
streusel, and then it's like cookie dough, just
Right.
making
Exactly.
cookie dough just to eat it.
Yes. Well, I love that when you have like the streusel toppings on things, like the apple pie,
Mhm.
like every now and then some people will do the streusel
Oh yeah.
instead of like the double crust. And I always want to just spoon off the streusel and just eat it. Just
There you
forget the
go.
apple, forget the crust. I'm just eating the streusel. It's just,
Speaking my language right now.
we need
Yes.
to have a streusel party.
Oh, now that would be fun.
Just big bowls of streusel.
That would be so
Wouldn't
fun.
that be
You
great?
know, don't ask me why I know this, but on Amazon you can buy streusel, pre-made streusel, by the
Okay.
5-gallon bucket full. It's meant for restaurants, but
Hey,
just
that
putting it
could
out
be,
there.
yeah.
If we're looking for a party.
A part. Oh, I'm thinking this should be a good book launch idea. There you
There
go.
you go.
I'm gonna have a book
Yeah.
launch party for Sarah with streusel and coffee because German
And
coffee's
coffee.
it's just critical, right?
Yes,
For the German
absolutely. Mm,
roots. And if you're not German, that's okay. We accept you. You can become one of us.
that's
We
right.
shall
All are
bring you
welcome.
in and adopt you into our bloodlines.
The only requirement is you like butter. Like
Oh,
that's
well,
it.
yeah.
If you like butter,
Is
come
there
on
anyone who
over.
doesn't like butter?
Well,
I
there
suppose there
there are
probably is.
people.
Yeah, there's people that probably choose not to partake in dairy, but I'm
Yeah.
also from Wisconsin, so that's like
Yeah, dairy capital.
dairy capital. It's a little difficult, so.
Can't escape it in Wisconsin.
No, no. So, okay, so readers are going to get streusel. They're going to get family legacy, a little bit of romance, not necessarily heavy on the romance, but there is a little bit in the book too.
There is a little bit of romance in the book. So this was so there's two point of view characters. One is
Okay.
Nikki, and the other is her uncle, her paternal uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is his farm that, was the family farm,
Okay.
and she escapes to she finds herself on
Okay.
Uncle Wes's farm, and this is where she finds the journal. So Uncle Wes is the other point of view character, and this is my first time writing from a male point of view, so hopefully I did it well. Um, but yeah, so Uncle Wes is there, and there he has a bit of love interest in his life.
Oh,
So also my first time sort of dabbling in romance. So, but
just a
just a
touch.
touch of romance.
That's my kind of romance where it's that heartwarming touch, but it's not necessarily saturated. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just
Yeah,
personal
yeah,
preference. So
that's
I love
right.
that.
Yeah.
So Sarah, if readers want to find out more about you, and this isn't your first book, you also have the Christie Award finalist novel, that Mrs. Kip. All I can think of is Mrs. Kip.
That's it. The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kip.
That's right.
Shorthand Mrs. Kip. I mean, that's what
Hmm.
most people have begun to refer it to. That's how I refer to it as
That's
well.
awesome. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
great books to be found. And even on your website, you have a little making of the cover video that people can go
Oh
check
yeah.
out, which is really cool. So how do we find your website? Where do we go? What do you
Yeah.
want to leave us with for the contact?
Yes, please come find me at sarabrunsvold.com. There's like she said, there's plenty of information about my books, and there's also an open invitation to drop me a line
Mhm.
through email if that is something of interest. But I'm also on Instagram, Facebook. Just look up Sara Brunsvold, and you should find me there.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to cut this podcast off so I can go make some streusel.
All right. Thank you so much for having me today.